Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to a new video. Today I have a pretty exciting one for you. I was able to finally get my hands on the brand new Leica Q3. Now this is actually my second time receiving this camera from Leica. The first time that I got it from them, unfortunately I only had a couple days with it, so I felt like it wasn't really enough time to really put the camera through its paces and see what it could actually do. To me, it felt more like a first impressions, which was awesome to get my hands on the camera that early on. But I requested actually hit them up to see if I could get the camera for a more extended period of time. To me, I just love seeing what cameras are actually capable of rather than just the spec sheets. So I was able to actually get this camera for the next few weeks. So I'm gonna have 2 weeks with the Leica Q3 to really see what it can do. I'm excited to bring it along on some shoots, just shoot some everyday life stuff, and hopefully bring you guys along for as much as possible throughout these next couple weeks. I don't want to give too many thoughts just yet because I literally just received this camera. I want to save a lot of that for the end of the video after shooting with this camera for a bit. But for now, just know that I'm very excited and I'm curious to see what this camera is capable of and how different it is versus other Leica cameras that I've tested. It's gonna be a fun few weeks. I got a few shoots coming up. I also have just some personal travels, some road trips, and bringing this guy along is going to be a blast. Let's go ahead and sit back and relax and enjoy. It should be a pretty fun few weeks with the Leica Q3. So I just shipped back the Q3 and I wanted to sit down and give you guys some impressions and overall thoughts about using this camera. So to me, the Q3 kind of sits at this interesting place in the market where price-wise, it's pretty much one of the most expensive cameras you can buy as far as a daily carry goes. And image quality-wise and, overall optics, it's pretty impressive. But I think the price, really does drive a lot of people away from picking up a Leica in the first place. And especially the Q3 sitting at $6,000 is certainly not cheap. But when you think about the kind of person that picks up a camera like this, they already know that they want this and they're probably already purchasing one right now as we speak if they already haven't purchased one. And I think the majority of us honestly just kind of want to see what you get at a very high-end price point for a camera like the Q3 and not necessarily pick one up, but really look and kind of appreciate from afar what this camera can do. So my experience with the Q3, the image quality, I think I first have to say, is second to none. It was really impressive to not only kind of shoot with the camera and see the photos come in on the screen. But more importantly, when I kind of blew them up in Lightroom and looked at them on my computer, I was really taken aback by the overall detail, sharpness, quality, and the optics of the beautiful 28mm lens. This camera takes beautiful photos, to put it simply. And honestly, looking through every single photo that I took over the last week and a half, the image quality, I think, really shines through the most out of this Q3. That beautiful 60 megapixel sensor, you really get the chance to see the full frame. And as someone who loves to shoot with medium format cameras, and 100 megapixel is usually my kind of benchmark with the GFX, this camera really performs very similarly in a sense where you can crop and really rearrange your image the way that you would like. And for someone like myself who loves to do that in post, this was a very welcomed sight when using the Q3. Now, speaking of that 28mm lens, this was the first time where I really was using a lens like this, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. 28mm to me personally is just usually not my favorite focal length. I think this is kind of geared at street photographers and people who like a little bit more of a wider field of view. I personally don't love shooting like that. I much more gravitate towards a 35 or 50mm equivalent. But I certainly understand why they did this, because you want to be able to obviously shoot as wide as you want, and on a fixed lens, 28mm does make a lot of sense. Now, I actually found myself shooting with the full frame without any crop modes quite often using this camera, and it was pretty fun to kind of shoot with the 28mm focal length. Again, as someone who doesn't use this focal length too often, I found it very interesting and kind of fun to mess around with the new focal length. Now, with this new and improved sensor, you're able to crop to 35, 50, 75, and now 90mm focal length equivalents. Now, obviously, these are not actual lenses that you're using. These are cropped images, you know, with the equivalent of the focal length from the 28mm. So if you're shooting the 90mm crop mode on the 28mm lens, obviously you're going to be losing quite a bit of megapixels in detail, but the ability to be able to shoot that big of a range with one single lens is pretty impressive. And I think Leica is really after kind of the convenience of just shooting one lens, and I think they do that beautifully with the Q system. Personally, I think my favorite crop modes are 35 and 50mm. I think you're able to get a nice crop, and it's nice to be able to pair those photos with something like the 28mm focal length to be able to tell a little bit more of a different story. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to get compressed backgrounds or any of the other benefits of a traditional, 50mm lens or 75mm lens. But again, being able to use one single lens and get all these different viewpoints and, focal lengths is really helpful, honestly. Now, this 60 megapixel sensor compared to something like 47 on the Q2, I think that's where a lot of people are going to want to be able to draw comparisons from. And I don't think you're going to notice too massive of a difference. I think overall the Q3 sensor does feel a little bit more sharp and clear. Maybe you'll notice the megapixel bump slightly, but I think overall, 47 megapixels is more than enough for pretty much everything that you could ever really need to shoot with that camera. And obviously 60 megapixels is something that no one's going to complain about. So a new feature that Leica is really focusing on is the ability to shoot pretty high-end video with this new Q3. And I shot quite a bit of test footage just in 4K using the Leica L-Log setting. And I used an ND filter, so I was able to shoot 1/50 on pretty much all of this. And overall, I think the footage looks really nice. I don't really have a lot of complaints. Again, bringing this back to what I said earlier, pretty much every camera can shoot really nice video nowadays. I don't really think I would use the Q3 as much to shoot video over something like my R5. It's just a little bit easier to shoot video on this, and it's kind of made to do it a little bit more than the Q3. When I hold the Q3 in my hands, it just feels like a photography camera. And when I think about Leica, the image optics are really what I tend to focus on when I'm shooting with a Leica personally. Now, obviously, it's really helpful to have all these video features that Leica has included with Q3, with the ability to shoot up to 8K footage. Personally, I don't think I would, again, ever really use that. 4K is more than enough for me. I think the real use case that I could really see for someone shooting video on the Q3 would be taking some photos and then also being able to shoot some video alongside. I think it's perfect for that, and you're not really going to have any complaints about the footage in that department. For me, with the flip out screen, I don't really love it, to be honest. I think especially on this kind of camera style, the Q2 I think really nailed it. Just having it, in the back of the camera without being able to move it, I think it's just one less thing that is going to be broken, one less thing you got to fix. I think for certain people who shoot street and love to have that kind of waist level view, I could totally see that being useful. But for myself, I think with this kind of camera and this design, I personally don't really love the flip screen. I think everyone's just kind of obsessed with flip screens nowadays, and I don't think they're always necessary. For something like the R5 right now, which what I'm filming on, the ability to kind of look at myself as I'm recording is obviously extremely helpful, and I think it's great for that. But again, flip screens are not necessarily for everyone. So some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it. It's just the way that it is. A welcomed addition on this camera, I will say, is the ability to charge via USB-C. I found this to be very helpful. I actually was headed out to shoot and realized that the camera was almost dead. I grabbed my portable battery and I plugged it in and was able to get a full charge by the time that I got to my shooting location. So I think this is a great addition. I will say the port cover works really well. It's nice and kind of tight on the ports, and I don't really see it being loose or kind of letting any sort of water or liquid getting into those ports, and the ability to charge with USB-C as well as import photos into the Leica Photos app is extremely helpful. So I think that's a very welcomed addition to this camera. Now overall, you guys know that I'm not too much of a specs guy. There's plenty of other videos out there on the internet kind of detailing every single spec about this camera, and I would encourage you guys to go watch one of those to really kind of get a nice breakdown of what this camera has in terms of features and specs. For me, I just really wanted to see what this camera was like to actually shoot with and to hold in my hands and to use on a little bit more of a daily basis. And again, I will say the image quality on this camera is superb. Having that full frame 60 megapixel sensor basically in your pocket is pretty incredible and honestly unheard of in the photography world. So props to Leica to be able to include all of these features into such a small form factor that can just swing around your neck and be taken anywhere that you would like. Now for me personally, this isn't necessarily the camera for me. There's a few reasons why that is. Mainly the 28mm lens I just don't think is my forte. I know a lot of people who love that focal length and this camera would be really great for them. For me personally, I just don't love that. And I love the ability to be able to just change my lenses. Honestly, simply put, combine that with the $6,000 price tag, and it's really tough for me to justify a daily carry camera that's $6,000. I definitely gravitate towards something like my Fuji X-T5 just a little more often. It's cheaper. I don't worry about it as much. I can throw it around and not worry if it gets dinged up because it is a third of the price. So, overall, this camera isn't necessarily for everyone, and that's okay. I think everyone out there is just up in arms about the price and, how expensive it is, and maybe the camera just isn't for you, and that's okay. As I said in the beginning of the video, the people that want this camera probably have already picked one up, and Leica has done a great job putting all these amazing features into, again, such a small form factor, so props to them. But overall, my experience with the Q3 was a very enjoyable one. I had a lot of fun bringing it everywhere that I went. And the photos, honestly, I'm really impressed with how they turned out. If you guys want to take a look at the full collection, I'll leave a link down in the description to my website where you guys can take a look at all the Q3 images. But overall, thanks so much to Leica for sending this Q3 out for me to take a look. And before this video wraps up, I did want to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace, for sponsoring today's episode. So as you guys know by now, Squarespace is a longtime supporter of this YouTube channel and my creative endeavors, and I can't thank them enough for their continued support over the years. Squarespace, simply put, is just the easiest way to make a website for any sort of creative out there who's looking to build a gallery page or sell e-commerce products or just have a great space to share their work as a creative. For me personally, I don't know how to do any sort of website coding or design, and Squarespace makes it extremely easy to drag and drop templates, rearrange files, make gallery pages, and it kind of makes you feel like you can really do anything with your website. I've been using Squarespace now for 8 years, and I can't recommend them enough. If you guys want to check out Squarespace for yourself, there'll be a link down in the description to receive 10% off your first website or domain purchase. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and thanks to you guys for watching. We'll see you next week.